Hey everybody, welcome to Track by Track. We're here with guest Nelson. Matthew and Gunnar Nelson are with us today to talk about their 27th anniversary release of After the Rain on vinyl, and they're going to tell you all about the vinyl, so let's get started. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to talk about the full album before we get started with the individual track by track explanation of every song. So can you tell me, can you rewind back to 1989, 1990, and what was going on and when you guys created this album?
You bet. Life was crazy in 1989. Actually, it's the world's longest overnight success.
Yeah, you got to go back a couple of years on this one.
We worked on this one for a long time. Matthew and I cut our teeth playing in the LA club scene from the time we were 12 years old. We started playing when we were 6. And going for that elusive record deal. That's basically the formula. That's what you did. You put a trip together in your mind, you put it together in reality, you played clubs, you built a following in Los Angeles on the Sunset Strip, and you hopefully got signed and got a record deal. And it took us forever to actually get John Kolodner, who worked for Geffen Records at the time. He was a superstar A&R guy. He did Aerosmith, he did Whitesnake, he'd done Peter Gabriel, and he had a lot of credibility. We kind of focused on him. And we went through this phase leading up to this particular record where all we did was write songs. We wrote songs for 3 years, just busting it out with our co-writer Mark Tanner, learning, growing, and developing. And in the process of making all the demos, the Nelson sound that it became known as really naturally developed. We realized that our thing was really centered around 2 acoustic guitars, melodic music. There wasn't a lot of blues involved in it. And the centerpiece to it was really the 2 of us singing together as brothers, kind of like as a co-lead sort of thing. And when we actually did get signed, it was a wonderful thing because technology was changing, the industry was changing, and we were given the option to put out this record in a variety of formats. You had cassette, which was a big thing, CD, which was out, but still kind of fairly new, only a few years old.
Yeah, 4 years old, actually.
And we were actually technically the last band on the Geffen label to release a record on vinyl, but vinyl was very different back then. It wasn't hi-fi vinyl. It was very thin and flimsy. And it was also great because we grew up with vinyl records and stuff. It was an honor to us back then to actually get it released anyways on vinyl. But times have changed, and that's what we're here to talk to all of you guys about. We're here to talk about a really exciting release and an even bigger honor after all of these years, which is the re-release after the remaster of After the Rain. I don't know when you became classic rock. You woke up the other week.
And they said, hey, congratulations, you're a classic rocker. Folks, this is it. 180-gram vinyl. Well said, by the way, Gunnar.
Thank you.
And it's an actual real album. You can actually open this up. You've got, sorry about that microphone. You've got song lyrics, and you actually have a song by song here, too, to take home with you on what we're going to be talking about today. 180-gram vinyl, audiophile quality. And it's a limited pressing, but it's a true honor. And more importantly, as an artist, I always kind of had that job in the twinship here of being product manager, which basically means Gunnar more the creative guy, I'm kind of like the polish guy. And it was important to note we could not find the masters of After the Rain for, I believe, 8 years of looking. The record company that we were signed to, Geffen DGC, was sold, I think, 4 or 5 times since the time we were signed there, which meant their assets or the master tapes floated around from warehouse to warehouse to warehouse. They were finally found. We were looking for analog 2-track masters that were un-EQ'd, unmastered, just basically the final mixes of the album in sequence, or even not. We could sequence it. We could not find our album. Even an album sold millions of copies. It went missing. And they were finally located when the company Friday Music, who was interested in putting this out, kind of put a little more heat on the Capitol Records people. And they went back into the vaults and they started looking where they didn't look before, namely in mismarked boxes that were the wrong size. And they found our original un-EQ'd master tapes for After the Rain, which meant I could go into Capitol Records with Everin Goknar, who's a Grammy-winning mastering engineer at the Capitol Records Tower, that iconic building. And we sat in there and we transferred this and EQ'd it with almost 30 years more technology behind it. Still analog to digital, but what an amazing difference this thing sounds. I mean, it's incredible sounding. And for the first time since Gunnar and I recorded this at Cherokee Studios in LA, this album sounds the way that we wanted it to sound. Not only that, but when we made it, this is how it's supposed to sound, finally available again.
All right, guys, the first track on your album is Love and Affection. And I always want to say can't live without your love and affection because that's the line of the song, but it's Love and Affection. Tell me about the song.
Well, this is really the one that started it off for us. Love and Affection was the song that was responsible for getting us signed by Geffen Records. We actually had been kind of in a holding pattern with Geffen, with John Kolodner. He was busy working on Aerosmith records, and we were small fish in a very large and successful pond. And we had been writing songs going back and forth. The procedure was we'd go away for a couple of months. We'd write songs together, as well as with our co-writer, Mark Tanner. We'd do some demos. We'd take them to John to listen to. And we did that for about 2 straight years. And we realized kind of like the exception, or the acceptance rate was about 1 out of 3 songs that we would bring in would get accepted. And this happened again for 2 years. And we actually had a writing session earlier on in the day when we were notified by some friends of ours that were helping us out that we were down to $17 in the bank. And so, I guess desperation kind of took over, and we went against our manager's wishes. We went into John Kolodner's office because we were so excited about the song we'd just written. And we went in without an appointment. We sat him down, broke out the acoustic guitars, and we played Love and Affection. And that's when we got signed. He heard it, and he just kind of went, first off, I want to see you guys had the stuff to come in here against your manager's wishes and be tough enough to do that. But the song's awesome. So now I hear it, I get it, and he pressed the go button, and we were in the studio for real, about 4 months later, making this record.
Well, what people don't know is that, and it's actually the technical full name of the song, full title is Can't Live Without Your, in parentheses, Love and Affection. We couldn't even figure out really what to call the song. And more importantly, when we recorded it, we were very excited when we wrote it, as Gunnar mentioned. But when we recorded the song, we were thoroughly unimpressed initially with how it turned out. Like so much so that it actually wound up on the cutting room floor, and nobody even knows that. Oh, it was so close to never making this album. And we discussed it, Gunnar and I did, and we had one last ditch effort that we decided to invest in ourselves. We had a friend of ours that had produced a lot of songs for Olivia Newton-John, believe it or not, and had worked with us on Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure on the soundtrack, a song called Two Heads Are Better Than One. And that was about a year before we got in the studio with Mark Tanner, who produced the album. Long story short, Geffen wouldn't let us call it Nelson because we hadn't released our album yet, so we came up with the name Power Tool. He was a great engineer, this guy David Holman, and we took a shot on him. We played it for him as it was, and he suggested honestly that we pretty much scrap it and start from new. I think the only thing that we had was a lot of drum parts that Gunnar actually went in and recorded some additional parts on, but the bass was redone, guitars were redone, most of the vocals were redone, and a complete new remix. And if you listen to that song, you can kind of notice that it has a little bit more of almost like a gloss, almost like a sheen to it that really made a sound. David really came from more of a pop background, and we really wanted a global album that was going to break on pop radio. And fortunately for us, in the final hours, that song not only came together, but it was really the obvious choice for a first single. We actually had another song picked, and it blew up from there. I mean, the song was a big monster hit, probably because it sounded really unique and really different, and very much unlike anything that was being played on the radio at the time.
It's true. Our number one actually did wind up originally on the cutting room floor. And I think it's normal. They say don't get in love or don't fall in love with the demo. And that's really kind of a normal thing to do. Mm-hmm. But in this case, the demo actually really did sound far better than our first attempt at going back in a real studio and redoing it. As Matt mentioned, working with a pop producer, remixer guy, we realized that our competition was no longer the other bands that were playing in clubs in LA. It was really what was on the Billboard Hot 100. And for something like this, we knew we wanted to have a pop success. There were some great sounding records on the radio at the time, and a lot of rock records that were being made that were, I guess a lot of rock bands were having to use ballads as their pop crossover thing. Mm-hmm. They just didn't really stand up sonically. And the one thing that David Holman really kind of added to this was just this contemporary snap to the single that made it stand out when it actually came on the air. And he actually wound up to produce No Doubt and
Bush, two big bands that
But the common thread is when the No Doubt stuff came on the radio for the first time, you heard it. It really sounded bigger and fuller and snappier than anything else. And so we actually really did need that edge. But again, that was really resuscitating that song from the trash heap, much like our father's song Traveling Man had the same kind of thing happen, where that actually wound up in the trash can too. But just a matter of degrees between something that winds up in the trash and something that winds up changing your life. You listen to this.
Show up.
Here she comes, just like an angel. Seems like forever that she's been on my mind, but nothing has changed. She thinks I'm a waste of her time. There she goes, no, she don't know what she's missing. Can't she see I'll never give up the fight? I'll do all I can. She understands my desire. I've been on the outside looking in. Let me into your heart. Oh, there's nothing on earth that should keep us apart. Baby, I can't live without your love and affection. I can't face another night on my own. I give up my pride to save me from being alone. 'Cause I can't live without your love. Ooh, your love. So I wait for an answer and wonder if tomorrow will be like yesterday. I keep holding on, but I can't go on living this way. Baby, I've been on the outside looking in. Bring my tears to an end. Oh, I realize there's no use for me to pretend. Oh no, I can't live without your love and affection. I can't face another night on my own. I give up my pride to save me from being alone. Baby, I can't live without your love and affection. I just can't go on this way anymore. As hard as I try, there's one thing that I know for sure. I can't live without your love. And there she goes. I can't live without your love.
All right, so let's talk about the next track on the album called I Can Hardly Wait.
Sure. I Can Hardly Wait is a song that we actually started our shows with. I think from the minute it starts, it's got this great little guitar piece that Gunnar came up with. And our live band, I think, really came through in the recording studio. Brett Garcid, our lead guitar player, unknown to a lot of people in America at the time, but he was kind of this young wunderkind out of Australia playing with a guy named John Farnham, who's kind of their version of Bruce Springsteen. I mean, I think the stats are 1 out of every 3 people in Australia own a John Farnham album. And this guy taught himself how to play, didn't have any access to television, so when he heard music coming through the speakers, from what I understand, he just thought, well, everybody plays like that. That's just how you're supposed to do it. So he was actually doing, 2 and 3 guitar players work on his own. And when we heard him through a manager friend of ours, we thought he was a natural choice, and it really came through on that song, and I Can Hardly Wait. It gets big. It's got a section in the middle there where it kind of breaks down a little bit. This song, more than a lot on the album, really shows off the band's musicality and our musicality, you know, our different influences. And I think beyond the heavy arena rock stuff that Gunnar and I were really into at the time and kind of grew up with like Queen and Foreigner and that type of stuff, we were also really seriously into the more acoustic bands, of course, the Eagles and the Byrds and, you know, at times the Hollies, which kind of made that crossover, America. So it's all in that song. And honestly, still to this day, I Can Hardly Wait's one of my favorite ones just because of what it says.
I think that song takes a lot of chances, which is what I like about it when I listen back to it. It's not as formulaic as just kind of like a verse, chorus, solo, out chorus, and you're done. Matt mentioned there was like a middle break that kind of takes you to another place. The one great thing about a vinyl release and the way we kind of envisioned the whole After the Rain record, we actually envisioned it as an album. It wasn't, you know, yeah, of course it was supposed to be a collection of songs where everyone hopefully was strong enough to be a single, but we wanted it to be an experience. And we wanted it to take you away someplace. I mean, when Matt and I were growing up, we didn't have it, believe it or not, very easy in the home. We came from a broken home, and we escaped into our music. And we remember listening to classic records. And a lot of our favorite songs were ones that took us to a different place. That song actually really does it. It kicks. And as you mentioned, it's the way we started every single concert on the After the Rain tour. But to me, that little exploration that happens in the middle is really what set Nelson apart from everything else that was coming out at the time. It was kind of like a nod back to the 70s and where we grew up. And I'm actually really, really proud of the way it turned out. And it's had some staying power. We actually still play it in our set today.
All right, now it's time for the title track, After the Rain. I love this song. It's one of my favorites, so tell us about it.
After the Rain, I'll let Gunnar bat clean up here because I'll just get the basics. It was one of those songs that we did with, of course, our focus on writing some hit singles, and it was one of the first ones that we wrote. But we also realized after it was completed, it was almost an exorcism, an expression of our frustrations with growing up and just what it takes to kind of make it out of tough situations, and that's what the song is really about. There was, of course, autobiographical. We had lost our father years before. We had come through that. We had kind of run the gamut, of emotions throughout the entire process of making the album, getting a record deal, having no money, doing everything that it takes to get to a place where you're writing your good stuff. And I think that's why we called the album After the Rain. It just was so autobiographical and so hopeful. And that's really what it was. For us, as Gunnar has mentioned before, music is a place that we escape to and something that got us up and above tough times. And I'm glad that we called it After the Rain. It makes a lot of sense to me emotionally. And there's one line in it Gunnar will probably tell you about, but we still to this day have people coming up to us saying that the song got them out of some pretty tough times as well.
You know, you never know when you're writing a song and it's a catchy song that you're happy with, the kind of impact it's going to make. The song actually started out life with a hopeful message to it, which is really what the whole Nelson trip was about. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of bands that were out at the time in 1989, 1990, bands that I love, super aggressive bands, and their whole stance on life was getting theirs, going out and taking and winning and doing all that. We actually had a really different previous 3 years to our making our record. We were still recovering from our father's death. The press was not nice to our family at the time. It was really our first exposure. And I mean, it happened when we were 18. So we were a couple of kids that were just kind of shot out into the world trying to make sense of things. Our twinship and our music was really what got us through that. And so in this particular song, when we were writing the lyrics, we wanted the lyrics to reflect the same kind of hope that we got out of music and we got out of each other. And the one line Matthew was referencing was a line, "Don't be afraid to lose what was never meant to be." I don't know why that particular line affected so many people, but I mean, not to sound trite or anything, but it's as real as it gets. We have people who have families to this day, people who come up to us and talk to us. When they were dumb kids, they were thinking about not being here anymore. and making people sorry when they're gone and all that. And that one line made them rethink that course and that path. And that's why I really truly believe, man, music to me, it's always been our salvation and stuff, but it's as close to magic as you really do get on the planet. I can't think of anything else that can reach out across the decades now and touch people that you will never meet, that you will never know got something out of your songs. This is the one that really was the first time that really happened in our lives. And it was a really great validation that all of those years, all of that time, all of that struggle, not giving up when it would have been so much easier to do that, made it all so much more worth it, so much more worth than just selling millions of records or being recognized. It's really all about making a difference. And this song is actually the key to that to me.
Well, for me, After the Rain too, just to wrap it up, it seems to have become, initially when it was released, and now even more so almost 30 years later, almost an anthem for the disenfranchised and the disheartened, and a real hopeful almost kick in the ass. And we have no idea why it is that way, but it really is powerful when people come up to you saying, listen, I was really serious about committing suicide, and that song for whatever reason spoke to me. And we've heard that honestly dozens of times. I don't know why.
But it was countless women that have come up and said, I dumped a relationship that I never should have been in the first place. Man, it's really cool to know. But trust me, we got more out of that song than anybody else did too. But that was really, I think that's really kind of our signature song.
It kind of is. As Love and Affection charted higher, but people know us more for After the Rain.
Absolutely, and I have to say that you're right. That song is timeless, and it's helped and is continuing to help so many people when they're in a difficult situation, and that's why that song is my favorite. I think it's so relatable for so many people for so many different situations. So good job, guys. I love that one.
Thank you. I'm glad you do. Don't be afraid to lose what was never meant to be.
Absolutely.
You're living in a fantasy, and you can't let go. He never really loved you from the start. The only thing he ever gave you was a broken heart. Don't be afraid to lose what was never meant to be. Oh, after the rain washes away the tears and all the pain. Only after the rain can you live again. I know the emptiness you feel inside. You're thinking if you break away, you'll never survive. Yeah, I'm waiting as my heart beats just for you. Come on and take my hand and I'll pull you through. But things will never change until you want them to. Oh, after the rain washes away the tears and all the pain. Only after the rain can you live again. Oh, after the rain, you'll see the sun appear to light the way. Only after the rain can you hope to find your love again. He never really loved you from the start. The only thing he ever
All right, now I want to talk about Tracy's song, And Only Time Will Tell.
Cool.
I love this song. I absolutely can't get enough of hearing it. I actually ask Alexa to play it on repeat quite often. So tell me about this song.
Sure.
Well,
They kind of run together.
they really do. And well, our sister Tracy, she's a wonderful lady, fine actress, was going through treatment for Hodgkin's lymphoma at the time. And we were in the studio recording at Cherokee Studios. And we felt a little selfish. She's fighting for her life. We have people depending on us too, and we had to find that balance between keeping our deadlines and not letting people down in the studio, and then taking breaks and going to visit her in the hospital. And we had just come from one of those visits, and she was having a hard time. We wanted to do something for her as a gift. And our father had a song called Song for Kristen. And Song for Kristen was a wonderful acoustic, solo acoustic bit that he did. He was studying with Segovia at the time, and he had put that on one of his records. Matthew and I grew up with that record, and we loved it. And to be really honest, we just stole the crap out of it. We did. We took Song for Kristen, and we gave it our own spin. And late at night, after we'd gotten back from the hospital, we were sitting with our boys in the band, and we're talking about the experience. And really organically, Paul Merkovich, our keyboard player, kind of adjourned and went out into the main studio and sat down on a grand piano and just started to play. And before you know it, we were all in the same room, and we decided to do the piece as a gift to our sister. And that's the way it turned out. That was recorded at 2 o'clock in the morning, wasn't originally planned out at all, and it turned out to be a beautiful piece and an incredibly natural segue into Only Time Will Tell, which is another story to it. Do you have anything to add about Tracy's song?
Not really. I just remember that it was one of those real examples on the album of Gunnar and my affinity for acoustic guitars, because we really believe that you can't lie with an acoustic guitar.
It's a truth teller.
It is a truth teller, and that's really kind of where we started and finished, is really on an acoustic guitar, and all of our favorite artists kind of did the same thing. But I think that's what it was. We told the truth when we recorded that song, and it was one take. There were no overdubs on it. It was just, that's how we did it with our band, and we made sure that it was in the same key that the other song that it runs into starts on, because we didn't have all this computer magic of tuning stuff, and that's what we did. We recorded Tracy's song first, and then went right into in the next session recording Only Time Will Tell. And Only Time Will Tell was, the big ballad. I mean, it's so funny now talking about it. The iconic intro with this big tum-tum-tum-tum-tum drums that they stole for the Real Men of Genius ad campaign for the beer commercials and stuff. It wound up
That's a compliment.
It is a compliment. But the song actually was not a love song. We wrote it actually about a friend of ours, a male friend of ours that we had grown up with, that quite literally is a child actor and went completely off the rails when he was 18. It was like he lost his mind.
He legitimately lost his mind.
He legitimately lost his mind.
Yeah.
And so we had one final, if you can imagine seeing somebody for 18 years and having a final goodbye, where you're talking to each other saying, well, I guess this is it, and we'll see if it's meant to be, we'll come back together. To this date, it's been almost 30 years and it's never happened. So time is telling.
But people actually do hear that song and they think that it is boy-girl relationship song, and it's cool. I mean, good songs can be translated a bunch of different ways, but the impetus for it was not that at all. It wasn't about a love relationship. It was about a friendship that, I think Jonathan was your oldest friend.
Probably, yeah.
I think so.
We
We talked
met
grade school and stuff.
I was 4 when I met this guy, and we went through school together. And one of those things. You grow up and you move on. But that was probably one of the hardest lessons I'd learned up to that point.
I think they say that about people in general, though. The whole reason, season, or a lifetime, you never really know. And we were at that point when we wrote that song, had no idea if that friendship was going to be for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And it's kind of held up overall. It's funny, a lot of the bands of our day back then, they had to actually do the big ballad in order to get airplay on pop radio. They started out on rock radio, and in order to make that one crossover, they all pull out, like, the Scorpions have to do Winds of Change, or
Great song.
Great song. Poison, Every Rose Has Its Thorn. They're always having to do that. Nelson, the funny thing is, I think the record company thought that it was going to be just straight up rock radio, and pop radio embraced it immediately. And it's kind of like the pop charts are kind of like the holy grail of charts. Being on the rock charts is awesome, and it's got a lot of staying power to it. But when you cross over from KNAC to KISS FM, it's totally mainstream, and your success level really changes. And all of your friends that were pushing for you and your bandmates in the other bands back when you were on rock radio now hate you because you've actually successfully made the transition. And so by the time that big ballad came out, we realized we didn't really need the big ballad because we were already on pop radio. I'm proud of the song, though. The song was really cool, but we did a video for that in the middle of our After the Rain tour, and we filmed it at Paisley Park at Prince's studio in Minneapolis. And what we didn't know at the time is that grunge had really happened. On our own label, they'd signed Nirvana, and the whole paradigm had shifted. Matt and I were in a bubble because we were out for 13 months straight on the After the Rain tour, and we didn't realize that the world was moving on. So we thought that the Only Time Will Tell video was going to get more legs than it did. Unfairly, it didn't. Like I said, the whole industry changed. Yeah. But we thought that that was going to be a big concept video and a lot to it. And so we went in first. We were going to film one day all of the performance stuff, and then we were going to throw the concept stuff in after the fact. And we got the phone call. That was the first indication that
things have changed.
Things have changed a little bit, boys. We're not approving the budget for all this other stuff.
We're not going to do the other thing. We're just going to leave it like it is.
Because we're not thinking that MTV's even going to play it. And we're like, what do you mean they're not going to? We've had 3 #1 videos before this. What do you mean they're not going to play it? No, you're not from Seattle and you're not wearing flannel. It's a long story. We'll tell you after you get off.
We'll tell you when you're done with what you're doing.
That's
We'll make
right.
money and we'll tell you at home.
But what happened was the song actually really did connect. It was also a top 20 song, and we're proud of it. We love what it turned into, but personally, it's kind of like always been a little thorn in my side. I thought it deserved more attention on radio, and probably would have gotten a little more attention had it been released 6 months earlier.
Exactly. And you're right. I mean, those flannels, everybody wore them.
Everybody did.
They did. We weren't exactly going to pull that one off.
Yeah.
Do I love you, baby?
All right, so now we're on to More Than Ever. So let's talk about that. Who was involved in writing this song? Did you guys have a co-writer for this?
We did. We actually co-wrote the song with Mark Tanner as well. We co-wrote most of the songs for the After the Rain record with Mark. Mark was really kind of like the third Nelson brother, and he really kind of got us musically. And it was a great midwife for this great record that came from all of that stuff. We were like, it's funny. We were
like the Three Amigos.
Yeah, and for a reason, we were 3 guys. Mark actually had a record deal before and didn't have a ton of success with that, and was a little frustrated. At this point, when we met, we kind of found each other at a point we were all at the same level of frustration. We wanted to get our record deal. He wanted to get another shot, and it worked out for all of us. The planets aligned, and that happened. This was the song, More Than Ever was the song where our live trip really came together. When we first released, it was Love and Affection was first, After the Rain was second, and we had put out our tour up for sale, but I think a lot of the critics and a lot of the kids didn't really know if it was real or not at that particular time. The whole Milli Vanilli scandal had happened like a year or 2 before. People saw our image coming along, and that was a lot for a lot of people to accept. And it was the More Than Ever video that we shot intentionally with a guy named Wayne Isham, who had done all those great Bon Jovi videos. He'd done Living on a Prayer and all that. And the strategy was the same for John as it was for us at the time. We needed videos that showed people what we were really like, and that it was real, and that the show was something awesome that you would want to go out and see.
We actually went a step further. The video has a live audio track. It's actually a live track. It's not even the album.
Yeah, if you were to see the video, if you were to search it and stuff and listen to it, we sound a lot like the record, but none of that was sweet, and that's actually how the band really sounded. There were no backing tapes or anything. Everybody really sang. Everybody really played. And that video, because people saw it and they saw the crowd, the video was actually shot down at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles, which is where
Olympic.
Olympic, the Shrine, very different.
Yes.
The Olympic Auditorium was where our grandpa Ozzy used to go down and watch the boxing matches when he was a young man. And it had been around forever. We didn't know if kids were going to show up to this whole thing. Pirate Radio in Los Angeles announced the video being shot. And it was the first time we really showed up and realized man,
We got
this
a
is-
tiger by the tail because this is nuts.
This is nuts. There was wall-to-wall kids, and unlike the earlier Wayne Isham videos that I mentioned, we didn't steal someone else's audience. That was really
Right.
our audience, and it was really a fantastic thing. So for me, more than ever, was really the song that opened up our live touring and
Yeah.
made Nelson a legitimate touring act.
I remember. Do you remember who was backstage when we were filming that?
Everyone,
As well?
Joey Ramone.
Joey
that's-
Ramone was there.
That was
okay?
cool.
He was a fan, which is awesome. I was a big Ramones fan, but I mean, Joey Ramone being a Nelson fan, kind of, yeah, I guess so. I mean,
He got it.
He got it.
He
got it.
was a pop guy. Joey was a pop guy. He
was.
always was.
He always was, but that was actually the song that I initially picked as being the first single. I thought that More Than Ever was really an obvious single, and it really got people moving and stuff. And then, dang it, we kept writing hits, and it kept getting pushed back. But at least we got a swing at it. And Gunnar's right. The truth was, initially people thought that it must be fabricated or made up because we really wanted a Technicolor look for what we did. We wanted to. It was a conscious decision on our behalf to go against all of the black and white leather warehouse videos that everybody was doing. Our music was not blues based like a Guns N' Roses or something like that. We were actually a counter statement. You know, we were California sunshine in the middle of all of that stuff, for lack of better things, with a little bit of an attitude. And so when More Than Ever was written, we actually had to establish those different things with the different singles. Fortunately, we pushed our way into getting a third shot with the third single, and I believe the song charted at number 16. It did really well. Broke the top 20. People still know it. We still love to play it live. And it's one of those things, as Gunnar says, the crowd moves to that one. You can get them going on it.
So guys, I have to know, are there any moments from recording this album that are your most favorite? And we'll start with you, Matthew. Are there any moments that stand out to you?
Well, from the recording standpoint, I think Cherokee Studios in LA, which is no longer there, like a lot of the recording studios, was a place that our father used to record at. And so walking in the studio there and tracking there was just something unbelievable. But what happened when this album first broke, Gunnar and I thought that we were prepared for the initial success of this album. We had come up in a famous family, all that kind of stuff, and we saw our dad go through it and come off the other end of that and then go back. I mean, as he said, a career is nothing but a series of comebacks. But Gunnar and I remember we came back from a stint on Dial MTV on MTV, and it was a big call-in show at the time. We spent 5 days in New York and really didn't know quite how successful it was. I mean, evidently we sold out of our first run, 50,000 copies the first day. I think within the first hour, it blew up. And we had an in-store signing event that was scheduled for Los Angeles at the Sherman Oaks Galleria, made famous by our friend Moon Zappa and Valley Girl. And they had a record store in there back when there were record stores. I think they actually scheduled it, our record company, because we all lived in LA and it wasn't expensive to have us travel down the hill. And in case it flopped, then no big deal. We go back up and order a pizza. So we actually got a car to come pick us up and went down to the Sherman Oaks Galleria. They brought us in a rear entrance. We had no idea about anything except the record executive and the guy from the record store came down, and they looked kind of terrified and said, "I've never seen anything like it.
Oh,
there
wow.
are girls everywhere." And we're scared about this. And I thought they were pulling our leg, to be honest with you, because we couldn't hear anything. It was concrete and the whole deal. They took us with our band up into the back of the belly of the whale of the Galleria and in a freight elevator, so you still couldn't hear anything. And as we got to the top, you know, these guys are still kind of freaking out. So you just wait. I'm like, oh, okay. And the door opened, and it sounded like a jet engine hit us right in the face, like, wow.
Oh, wow.
There were 3 levels, and each level in the mall was completely packed with a female, and it was absolutely insane. And Gunnar and I didn't even know what to say to each other because we really were not prepared for that. They had velvet ropes set up there.
I said, hell yeah.
Yeah. And,
Hell yeah.
and I remember it kind of got a little scary. They let some people in, and we took pictures, we did the whole thing, and then the chicks in the back realized there's no way that they were going to get at us, so they started getting physical to the point of where the cops called it a day after half of an hour. They said, "You guys need to leave or we're going to arrest you. You're going to cause somebody to get hurt." And that's really when we knew
Wow.
that this was a little bit different than we expected it to be. I mean, we thought we were going to build into something. It was like the world's longest overnight success. And I mean, it was instant Nelson mania, which was pretty awesome. But
Yeah.
they bought these.
What about for you, Gunnar? What's your favorite
Well,
moment?
I think my favorite memory happened in Erie, Pennsylvania, what was leading up to that. Matthew and I, just to prove that we were real, we actually had to. We were kind of considered as guilty until proven innocent. We had to go out there with our acoustic guitars to all the radio stations all over the country for about 6 months before we even released the record. And we would go into morning shows. Starting out, when we did this tour, it started out on the really kind of small rural stations. They call them priority 3s, P3s. Then going up to the P2s and the P1s. And
P1s are the Big Mac Daddies.
they're the huge, that's Z100 in New York, Kiss FM in LA and stuff, the impossible ones to get on. But we spent about 6 months every single day going out there to radio and taking over morning shows and playing acoustic and doing all that. And the problem with that is that I never naturally heard our first single on our hometown station. We were gone forever. And I had friends calling us up going, oh, we just heard Love and Affection on pirate radio. It sounds so good. And we hadn't had that happen yet. And we finally got off of this radio tour. And we'd just gotten back from Erie, Pennsylvania, playing for 60,000 people, acoustic, and building this whole thing. And I was unpacking my suitcase in the house that we were renting. And sure enough, from the other room, I had a boombox playing just in case pirate radio decided to play the song. And I heard that 12-string playing through the wall on my hometown station in our home, surrounded by friends. And it was just a great moment. And it had been playing for a while on the radio and stuff. It was the first time I got to hear it in LA, on my own stereo. And I just thought, man, that sounds pretty good. That's a good sounding record. And I really honestly didn't know what it was going to do. But here we are 27 years later talking about the re-release of the vinyl on this whole thing. I didn't know that it was going to become what people consider a classic rock record. It's a huge honor. It's a really great thing when you're a kid and you're playing Madame Wong's West on a Wednesday night to know about the sound man when you're working your way up. This is the stuff that we dream about. We fantasize about this, You're going out there and you're playing these rough gigs as you're working your way up, thinking, hey, one day, wouldn't it be really cool if, they made a record on us, like a record that we could hold? And they did, like in a really big way.
And he's holding it now.
And this is it. So to me, honestly, that was really the whole thing. It was really more of a process. I can't say it was any one thing because all of it was a blur, from promoting the record, playing the radio shows, doing the TV events, writing the videos, filming the videos, fighting for the videos when the record company didn't want to submit them and MTV didn't want to play them, and sticking to our guns. There was a lot of tenacity and belief and faith that was involved in this trip that came from the two of us. We had to convince the powers around us that, win or lose, we were going to do it our way. And it was going to be our vision. Because what we learned coming up is if you actually cater too much to other people's opinions, you try to make art by committee, and it's someone else's idea, even if you win, you lose. It's a hollow victory. Mm-hmm. And on this, everything from the image to the songs that were written, to the way it was recorded, to the way it was presented and midwife to the public and shown visually, this was all us. This was not a fabrication. This wasn't like, there wasn't some Svengali behind us actually making this happen. Matt's responsible for this, and I'm
all me.
And I'm in there with him, and this was a partnership. But I'm rambling here only because I'm overwhelmed sitting here with this in my hands, 27 years after, proving to all of those well-meaning friends and teachers that they were wrong, and actually you can make your dream happen and make music and be heard and have a message and live a great life. They say that, doing what you love to do for a living and getting paid for it is like having a license to steal. This is proof that we've been thieves for 27 years.
Absolutely.
Did you get paid?
Not yet.
Okay.
Oh gosh, we got to take care of that. Who's going to call payroll?
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
sharing
you.
that story.
Thank you.
That's amazing. All right, so up next is Desire. Can you guys tell me about that? Because that title, it's pretty intriguing.
Desire was a song, I think we started writing that because we really loved the song Hot for Teacher. And as an aspiring drummer, I always wanted a song on the record that had a double kick drum sort of thing to it. Bobby Rock just totally nailed it when he actually did it. But this was a song that we did, was this the one we did with Brad Bailey?
No, this is not the one we did with. It was a Mark Tanner co-write that we did this one. I just remember the thing that differentiated it from Hot for Teacher was, yes, it was double kick drum, but I remember it almost had a swing to it. It was a little bit of a different groove, and really a difficult groove to pull off. Bobby Rock did a great job with it, and it was a high point on our tour. People love that song.
I think the verse has a little throwback to our Grandpa Ozzy's era too.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a sort of a big band sort of swing to it that
Kinda
you're
like
mentioning. Right, little tongue in cheek. Man, it's tough to make a major keyed song sound tough, but this actually kind of managed to do it. This has actually always been a favorite live, though. This is something that actually really does work. And when we actually went out on our first tour, this was really a high point in the set.
All right, so Fill You Up. Tell me about this.
Fill You Up, of course, a double entendre title and meaning in the song all the way through. A little bit tongue-in-cheek, but also another thing that's actually more an inspirational song than a "Hey, I Want to Get Laid" song, although that's there too. We had fun with it because it was another song that we would revolve as far as the opening of our live set, and it does open, I think, side 2 when you flip that record over. And again, Gunnar had mentioned this too. We've never really talked about how much time we put into the sequencing of this album. I know you said that you wanted to make it an album. We did, but I remember we used to do things like we would cut out the song titles on pieces of paper and move them around. And here's your A side, here's your B side. I love the fact that we're back here again almost 30 years later because this sequence is everything on this album. You can just put on the headphones and go right through it and then flip that record over, have a completely different but continuous experience. And I think it's a great way of opening up side 2. It was a great way of opening up our shows. We still play it sometimes first when Nelson goes out and tours. But I love the fact that it makes people smirk a little bit. You know, it's kind of it's our way of letting people know we're not entirely dumb blondes.
You're not at all.
Not entirely.
Not entirely. He is a little more than me.
Next up is the interlude and Everywhere I Go. Can you guys talk about both of those for us?
Sure. The interlude was something that just kind of happened organically. Matthew and I were in the control room going over some mixes, and our vastly overqualified keyboard player, Paul Merkovich, was out in the main tracking room. Paul has gone on to do some amazing things. He came from a jazz background, actually, when we found him. He was a session guy that was working on our demos. He also had a road gig with Jeffrey Osborne. So when we met Paul, best keyboard player we've ever heard, best pianist we've ever heard, and he has a wonderful voice. But he had short hair and the whole pocket protector sort of vibe.
He kind of went from Bill Nye Science Guy to rock god all in one cycle there.
He nailed it. And he went on being Cher's musical director and working with Janet Jackson and doing that whole rock star in excess thing. Mm-hmm. And now he's the musical director. I think this is The Voice that he does now.
He does The Voice, yeah.
And it's amazing. But that particular day, we were in the control room, as I mentioned. We were running through some mixes. And we heard Paul playing this thing on this beautiful grand piano in the tracking room. And we just hit the red button, and we actually had it recorded. He was kind of free-forming this thing. It was something that he had been working with for about 2 weeks while we were in the studio recording. And he just said it kind of evolved. But it really is kind of like a musical journey when you listen to it. It takes you to this really interesting sort of melancholy place, which wound up being the perfect intro for Everywhere I Go, which is a song Matthew and I started in Australia. It was actually the very first song that wound up being on the After the Rain album.
It was the very first keeper, yeah.
Oh, wow.
We had a manager at the time that thought that traveling was the best way to season us. We were kids when we all met. We were 18, 19 years old at the time. We hadn't really been out of the States at all to speak of. And he was an Australian guy. He brought us down to Sydney, and there's a neighborhood there called King's Cross, which is really rough. It's really rough. And he just thought, we're not going to put you in a Four Seasons. We're going to put you in just this ramshackle place in the roughest neighborhood in Australia.
We were stepping over needles to get to where we needed to go.
Needles and
Oh,
bums,
rough,
and
yeah.
and it was interesting. And
Wow.
when we were on that trip, the song actually started about 4 or 5 days into the trip. We were kind of in isolation, as Matthew mentioned, in the middle of a bunch of plight. It was like a war zone, feeling really far away from home, feeling really isolated and far away from home and from the people that we loved. And everywhere I go, that guitar figure just kind of started, like Matthew had been writing Love and Affection when it happened with that guitar figure. His mind was some other place. My mind was some other place with the beginning of Everywhere I Go. I was missing my girlfriend at the time.
Wondering if she was being faithful to him.
Well, I know the answer to that one, but that's a different song.
Yes, it is.
Like
That's
if
a
murder
much
were
different
only
song.
legal.
That's right.
Right.
They
But-
frown on that in the States.
That's right. But that song was really cool because we've been writing songs with the eventual goal of getting a record deal and having this album that actually came together. But that song was the first song where Matthew and I realized we were kind of onto something, that there was a germ of an idea and something really special. And it's funny, every time I hear the opening of that song, I'm instantly back in King's Cross in Sydney as a kid with no certainty at all in life, with a father who had just passed away, about as far away from everything that's familiar as you could possibly get. And the only thing that made me feel connected to sanity was the guitar that I had in my hand. And the song kind of evolved from that.
Wow, that's an incredible story and really interesting and eerie at the same time. Needles, you stepped over needles.
Oh, it
staying
was
there.
King's Cross was really rough. It was right near a methadone clinic, and they thought it was a great idea to put a hotel near a methadone clinic, or vice versa. I just remember that you were 2 blocks away from a red light district that made Amsterdam look like nothing. It was rough. But I love Australia. Gunnar and I had a great time. I remember one of the little side notes was the demos that actually wound up being part of the After the Rain album. When we were flying over to that trip, we actually ran into a couple of people that were heroes of ours. It was Chrissy Amphlett and Mark McEntee from the Divinals. And they sat in we were in coach, and they sat in coach right in front of us. We hadn't done anything yet. I just kind of mentioned, I had a crush on Chrissy Amphlett. I know she was scary pretty. In other words, she scared me, and she was pretty. And she was fierce on
What
stage.
a great entertainer. Both of them were just brilliant.
Yeah, and
Brilliant.
this is years before, I Touched Myself became a huge hit. We loved their first album and stuff, Boys in Town, stuff like that. Anyways, I just remember how cool they were. We definitely had time to kill, but we got a chance to, hip them to our demos on a little Walkman cassette player and get their advice and stuff like that. And it was one of the coolest moments. It's kind of like when I flew with Michael Hutchence from China to California once and got a chance to talk to him. When you're on a plane, you get to share some stuff. But we never got a chance to play with them, and that would have been a great double bill as Nelson and Divinals. That would have been awesome. But,
It would have been great, and I think fans would have absolutely loved that.
That would have been awesome.
Well, we're almost done. We have 2 tracks left. The next one is Bits and Pieces. Can you guys tell me about the experience writing that song and creating that?
Sure. Bits and Pieces was really a pure Mark Tanner co-write. Gunnar and I in our shared bedroom in a little house in Pacific Palisades. I remember that day well because we really, really wanted to go to the beach. It was over 100 degrees. We were dying. All our friends were there. And we decided it was more important to write songs and create a hit if possible. And we're glad we stayed. We had unfortunately a Labrador Retriever that was a little gassy. That added to the ambiance that day. But what we wanted to do was do something that was kind of almost a 60s throwback, almost a Hollies type of a song. And that's really where that kind of came from. It started with the guitar lick the song starts with. And I think I started writing that. Gunnar jumped in. And then Tanner jumped right in with a little bit of melody, and it really was written quickly. I got a chance to sing that one. I think the only song on the album I got a chance to sing lead on. And people don't know this. I used to be the primary lead singer, the main vocalist, before I jumped up and sang harmony off of Gunnar stuff. We realized while we were doing the demos for the album that Gunnar had a little different tonal quality, what I call, he had more enchilada. He could really, get that kind of blues rocky kind of thing to it. And I had a little bit of a higher range. So it just wound up becoming the Nelson sound. So selfishly speaking, it was kind of nice for me to get a chance to sing a song in the set. It was also a really cool time for Gunnar to get a chance to take a little vocal break because he worked really hard during the show. But every once in a while I get somebody coming up saying, hey man, Bits and Pieces was, and I was like, oh.
I seem to
There's my
recall,
ego.
I seem to recall that Bits and Pieces was a real contender for a first single on the After the Rain record before we chose Love and Affection. It really was in the hunt for that. And I think the reason for that is there's shared DNA between what became the Nelson sound, which has that whole Holly's influence with the jangly guitars and with, in Love and Affection's case, a 12-string. But in Bits and Pieces, I believe it starts on an A chord, right? Is it an A or an E?
It's a low E.
Okay, so it starts on an E
D-tune,
chord.
yeah.
Same shape, you just move it up a few frets. It's very easy to play, but it's a style that they used to do a lot in the 60s with all of those great bands like the Hollies. And to me, that's it felt very Californian to me when we actually wrote that song. And that was really kind of just like Love and Affection. That started out with Matt and that really specific kind of guitar style. And then everything else kind of followed. Usually we'll write songs from melody first. Usually we're not really riff writers. There are a lot of people who come from a guitar background that'll get something that actually sounds pretty cool on guitar, and then they'll force a song around that to fit. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, it does. But I think that the strongest songs are written the same way Paul McCartney likes to write. His whole thing, number one for him is melody.
Yeah.
He starts with melody first. And he says if the melody is strong enough, it's going to evoke a certain emotion, and then the listeners are going to be interested enough in the song to get into the lyrics. So to him, lyrics were always secondary.
It's like, ham and eggs. Guess today I'll have some ham and eggs. That was basically yesterday. That's what it started, was ham and eggs.
Yeah, so. and usually what we do is we'll start with the melody first, and we'll put the music around it. That song actually really did start. It was a rarity because it did start as that guitar figure. And everything else kind of followed from that. Good song, though.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for singing Ham and Eggs.
Thank you. I'll sing it better next time. Give me another take. Give me another take.
All right, we made it. We're at the last track, Will You Love Me? Tell me about that.
Will You Love Me? Will You Love Me?
We fought for this one.
We really did. We fought hard for it, and we're really glad that we did for a couple of reasons. This was a song that we actually wrote without Mark Tanner co-writing it with us. We had a different co-writer, a wonderful guy named Brad Bailey. Brad Bailey was just the coolest, sweetest, most awesome guy ever. And he was a guy who had been working like we had, working his way up for years and years and years trying to get a break. And he was one of those guys. It's funny, when you actually haven't had a hit yet and you don't have a record deal yet, not many people will work with you. They won't spend the time to write a song with you. Like the established writers and stuff, they'll only work with you if you've got a record deal and you're going to guarantee it's going to be a single and yada, yada.
Right.
He was a guy that actually met us, thought we were cool. We thought he was cool. And we were hanging out in the process of doing that. We started writing this song. And this was before we got our record deal with Geffen and everything. And we kind of had a good day writing, and we put it on a shelf and kind of forgot about it until we started recording the record for real. And we realized that, hey man, that's a pretty cool song. We should listen to that again. And we did.
And we really didn't have anything like it on the album, and it needed it, to be honest with you.
It needed the weight, I think. And we let Brad know that we were going to be cutting that on the album. And it was his first cut ever. It was the first cut. And the coolest thing about that, it was actually the B-side on one of our biggest singles. It was either Love and Affection or After the Rain. It was one of the ones that actually sold the most. In having that song wind up as the B-side of one of the hits that we had that did so well, it was transformative. It changed Brad's life. It changed everything. He actually became a legitimate writer, and he was able to do what we did too, prove all of our teachers wrong.
Yes.
And stuff, and it was a really great moment, and no one deserved it more than Brad. And And it was a wonderful thing. And Matthew did mention we really did have to fight for it. We
I
had to fight
remember
with.
we were in the studio with Mark Tanner, and he was saying, "I don't think you need this song," and I kind of knew where he was going. And obviously, he loved his own work, and he's a very talented guy. I mean,
And we had plenty of co-writes with Mark. We had other ones to choose from.
and Mark, by the way, we never really talk about Mark. We've lost touch with him, but I mean, he wound up after us doing work with Sean Colvin, and there was a big hit he had with The Calling. You remember, "If I Could, Then I Would." That was Mark Tanner, and it kind of sounds like him, but.
Right.
He was fighting for his music, we were fighting for ours, and more importantly, we just thought that the energy that we had, the spirit of what we started doing actually kind of started with that song, really, more so than anything. I know you had mentioned that one of the other songs was the first Nelson sound, but that was really more the first spirit of, hey, we have believers that that might not be at the top of the call list, but we really wanted this to get on there, not because we thought it was going to change his life. We're just so happy that it did, and also there's a little bittersweet thing. We saw him at our concert at the Universal Amphitheater. This was a show that we sold out in 5 minutes, and I think it was 6,500 people, and he couldn't have been prouder. He was backstage, gave him a big hug.
Got to hear his song being played in front of a full house full of
Great.
people.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. I mean, he literally was glowing, and we lost him tragically a few months later in a car crash. And I remember talking to his family after that, saying that it was kind of the high point of his very sweet life. He was a good guy, He wasn't downtrodden or anything. He was together and all that. It was just
He was just fighting the fight, and
fighting the fight.
like we all do, and he got a break, which was really great. And then we got to be a part of that whole thing. And I remember after I heard from his wife that he was gone, I remember having the conversation in the studio with Mark and with the record company guys, and fighting as hard as we did for this particular song. Sometimes Matt and I do things we don't really realize why we feel so compelled in the moment. We just know that we've got to do it.
Right.
And not to get all spiritual or weird or anything like that, but that was an example of a conviction that I know we had that was vindicated later on when the events unfolded. I am so glad that we stuck to our guns and that happened. And
Absolutely.
realize this record, this album, I can now say it's an album.
It's an album.
This album here is,
As you can tell, this is personal. This is a manifestation of some very, very personal stories with people and places. This was a journey, this album. Not Journey the band, but you know what I'm saying. And
but this thing, as I'm looking at it, this is the fruition of, the only thing Matthew and I ever wanted to do from the time we were babies, literally, was to make music and to hopefully do that at the highest of levels. We actually had great social proof in our home. Our dad being as successful as he was and selling 200 million singles in his career, and
It's amazing.
our grandpa Ozzy having his own number ones with his big band and doing all of that and creating a dynasty with the Ozzy and Harriet show. This was our shot. But in reality, after our dad died, I mean, we basically had a high school education. We weren't really prepared for losing our dad or for our life plan. We just knew that we really wanted to make music. There's a million people who want to go out and make music and do that. There's fewer now, but back in that day, everyone had a band and everybody said that they wanted to do it. And when I look at this album, I realize what it means, and the title being After the Rain is so appropriate, because honestly, Matt and I have every reason in the world to have wound up Hollywood statistics and tragedies, and we were lucky, and we had each other to keep grounded. We had our shared love for music. We didn't drink. We didn't do drugs. We had other vices that having a hit record will let you explore, which is a lot of fun. That's going to be in the book that's coming up.
All right.
But they're smoking hot and walk around on two legs. Another story. But this whole thing was really the beginning. Lots of records come out. To this day, thousands and thousands of records come out every single year, and you never know which one's going to connect. I'd like to say that, or I'd like to believe that this record connected with people on two different levels. It was kind of like the Paul McCartney theory. The songs sounded pleasant, and they sounded inviting and embracing and different. And it was enough to achieve the goal that we wanted, which was love us or hate us, you're going to know who we are. Yes. It was really a sonic introduction that kind of led to something else, because underneath that candy sheen was the weight of the life experience of a couple of guys who should be dead and aren't, who should be defeated and aren't. And it doesn't really matter.
And for every reason why where we came from is an asset, it's also a detractant. It's a negative as well. It made us work harder.
You know, no one at a record company wants to have a high-profile signing. The people behind the other side of the desk, it's like corporate America in general. They always fail their way up. The key is to be at all the meetings, but never be the guy who signs on the dotted line or goes, I believe in this.
Because if it fails, they're fired.
That's right.
Yeah.
They're fired right away. And this was one of those things where we had a famous father, a famous family. So having a low-profile signing was not going to happen. It required a John Kolodner,
Right.
who was 10 feet tall and bulletproof at that time, doing both Whitesnake and Aerosmith, who were both on a major lick at that time. He had some job security and was able to do it. But still, if you actually look, do the Google search, you're not going to find any pictures, unlike all the other bands, of Matthew and Gunnar actually signing. You know, those industry
Right.
pictures that everyone has. You won't find one, because as much as they could, they wanted it to be under the radar just to see what was going to happen. We recorded the record, and at the time, our label had actually prioritized another band called Little Caesar. And those guys are great. Ron is a great lead singer, and their first single was Chain of Fools.
They
It was
had
a cover.
tattoos.
They had lots of tattoos.
Yeah.
And their tattoos were fabulous.
A lot of tattoos.
And that was the priority band. Every label has a priority act for a quarter. You know, they get together with their budget meetings and they say, okay, well, this band's going to get the magic wand wave. And our band wasn't it. We were the runners-up. But we were lucky. We actually sat in for Daisy Fuentes on MTV. She had a little vacation break. And Matthew and I just kind of sat down and cut up on each other and played our acoustic guitars and gave some previews of the songs on this record. And when we actually put it out to market, it sold out of its first pressing of 50,000 copies in the first day.
Wow.
That's
And we
the
had the
power.
#1 video on Friday when it was released.
That's
you
right,
know?
and that's just the power of television.
Yeah.
But none of it was smoke and mirrors. The music's real. The records were real underneath the pageantry and the image. And
And by the way, I want to tell you why that happened. It wasn't just because we wanted to be different, but Gunnar and I, he'd mentioned we traveled a lot. One of the places we went before we made this album was England. And we wrote with a great writer named Russ Ballard. He was in the band Argent. He wrote Hold My Head Up, Hold Your Head Up. He wrote Magic for America. I mean, he's one of the great songwriters of all time. And we stayed there for a month. And in our trip there, writing with him, we went to some industry events in London. And it was that one woman that approached us when we were kind of hanging out, and beautiful black lady came, so totally stylish and looked rock and roll and hip and sleek. And she kind of looked us up and down and said, "What are you going for?" And I said, "Excuse me?" She said, "What are you going for? What's this look? What do you
is
mean?"
it kind of like a mishmash of a rock and roll cowboy thing?
What are
is
you
this?
doing? And I said, "Well, hi, I'm Matthew." She said, "Well, I wanted to tell you, I don't know who you are, but if you're musicians, you've got to fix this stuff up. Because in where we're from in England, obviously you're American in England, the look and what you present is as important or more important than the music. You know, this is show business, all right? Nobody wants to go see a plumber." And then she walked out. And so Gunnar and I took that back with us, and we thought, well, we got the music handled. I think we've got that really well, but let's make a statement with how we're going to present ourselves, because there's absolutely, our saying used to be, we have 5 seconds for somebody to flash through the dial, and if you catch their attention, well, maybe you got a shot. It was the same with television. You know, think about all of the chatter that was on MTV at the time. The biggest radio station in the world was MTV. We had no guarantees whatsoever that anybody would give a crap.
Right.
And so that's basically what we did, was we designed our own clothing. And honestly, I'm glad for it, because like this kind of stuff, this is all stuff that we designed and all that. And it got, if you saw the videos, it got pretty intense. It went away during the More Than Ever thing. Our third single, by the fourth single, was gone. We had a management and we had a record company that didn't understand it and took a lot of heat for it, because frankly, Gunnar and I were easy to poke shots at. But it got us noticed. And more importantly, it brought enough people in to this album to give it a listen. And that's why we had ravenous fans. We had people that, it was more than just, chicks that had the posters, which was awesome. But the people that come up to us now, ironically, are predominantly males that were like closet Nelson fans, had our album. They couldn't tell their friends about it, but they got the music. They understood it. They understood
It's wonderful. The opportunity that you're afforded with this record is that image doesn't matter. You put this on your turntable, 180 gram, remastered with all the lyrics and the track by tracks and everything, and our image doesn't matter. Who we're related to doesn't matter. None of it matters.
I still think you're beautiful.
Thank you. And it's all about the music,
Yeah.
which is really the true north in our compass. Honestly, music is what really has gotten us through a bunch of really difficult times. Here we are, 27 years later. I am literally holding our dream in my hands. It's got weight to it in a bunch of different senses. This is something I'm actually really grateful for.
And it's an honor. They don't really do this with everybody. Just the fact that we got chosen to have this album, and I think what they said was it's considered an iconic album, and that to me is a dream come true.
But, saying to my partner here, all I ever wanted to do was make music. And we're sitting here all these years later, and not only did we get to do that, but something like this comes up, and something that we've done is iconic enough to the powers behind the desk here to want to do something like this, to want to go and find the original master tapes, to remaster it, to care as much about it as we did from the very beginning. I'm really proud of this work. I really honestly am. And this was only the first step, but so far it's been the one that's been the most lasting. And here we are after all these years, and the title still makes sense, and it still means something. So anyway,
30 years and 14 albums later, Spinal Tap is still going strong.
Well, you guys are great. Thank you so much for sharing everything, all the stories. Where can fans pick this album up at?
On our website, look us up online. There are multiple Nelson Brothers. We seem to come right up in a search engine, though, and it's on our website. I believe the NelsonBrothers.com will get you there. And I think we also have Matthew and Gunnar Nelson, right?
Yeah, all of our web presences are out there. It's not going to be difficult
It'll
to find.
redirect right there.
You're going to find this on Amazon as well, and all the online outlets as well. But more important, man, honestly, this is going to be different than anything else that is out there, because as we mentioned ad nauseum here, this thing has been remastered. So for the first time, it sounds like what it sounded like when it was coming through the bigs at Cherokee. And something got lost in translation. We didn't realize what that was back then. And it really was. It sounded thinner. When it finally dithered down to, back then in that technology, they didn't know what they were doing with CDs. So things went from analog to CD, and the numbers got crunched, and they said, oh yeah, well what this is going to do is it's going to get rid of your least significant bits. And sorry to say that apparently the least significant bits were your bass parts. And now you can actually hear the bass parts in this, and you can hear the kick drum.
I hate it when I lose my least significant bits.
Me too.
I think every bit of me is significant, personally.
Which bits would those be, Seth?
That's right. Yeah.
Well, you guys heard them. Go check them out on their website. Make sure you order your copy of After the Rain now. And if you can get to a live show, you guys got to get to a live show. But for now, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.